In a bustling New York restaurant, a powerful CEO's mocking words to a black waiter, "If you're so smart, then translate it," sparked a moment that would leave the entire room speechless, exposing hidden truths and shattering assumptions in an instant. The evening was in full swing at La Belle Étoile, one of Manhattan's most exclusive restaurants. The air buzzed with the clink of wine glasses, the hum of conversation, and the soft jazz playing in the background. At a corner table, a group of sharply dressed executives from Pinnacle Enterprises, a multinational tech conglomerate, celebrated a recent merger. At the head of the table sat Richard Hargrove, the company's CEO, a man known for his razor-sharp intellect and even sharper tongue. Across from him, the waiter, Marcus Evans, moved with quiet efficiency, refilling glasses and clearing plates. His presence barely noticed by the group until it was. Marcus, a 32-year-old man with a calm demeanor and a quick smile, had been working at La Belle Étoile for 3 years. He was good at his job, anticipating needs before they were voiced, and he carried himself with a quiet dignity that often went unacknowledged. Tonight, though, his life was about to intersect with Hargrove's in a way neither could have predicted. The executives were deep in conversation about Pinnacle's latest acquisition, a German software company called Technikforce. Hargrove, leaning back in his chair, was holding court. His voice carried the confidence of a man who had built an empire from nothing, and he relished the attention of his colleagues. They hung on his every word as he recounted the negotiations, his tone laced with self-assured amusement. "It was a masterstroke," Hargrove said, swirling his wine. "The Germans thought they could outmaneuver us, but I saw through their bluff. Their CEO tried to throw in some last-minute clause in the contract, something about intellectual property rights. I told him, 'Herr Schmidt, if you think you can sneak that past me, you're gravely mistaken.'" The table erupted in laughter, the kind that comes from people eager to please. Marcus, standing nearby, caught the tail end of the story as he approached to clear a plate. He moved silently, his hands steady, but Hargrove's eyes flicked toward him. "You," Hargrove said, his tone suddenly sharp, pointing at Marcus. "What's your name?" Marcus paused, meeting Hargrove's gaze. "Marcus, sir." "Marcus," Hargrove repeated, his lips curling into a smirk. "You've been hovering around all night. Tell me, Marcus, do you understand what we're talking about? Mergers, acquisitions, high-stakes deals." The table fell silent. A few executives shifted uncomfortably, but none spoke. Marcus straightened, his expression neutral. "I follow enough, sir. It sounds like a complex deal." Hargrove's smirk widened. "Complex? That's an understatement. You wouldn't understand the half of it. But let's test you, shall we?" He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a document, a contract written in German, part of the Technikforce acquisition. He slid it across the table toward Marcus. "If you're so smart, then translate it." The challenge hung in the air, laced with condescension. The other executives exchanged glances, some suppressing smiles, others looking uneasy. Marcus didn't flinch. He glanced at the document, then back at Hargrove. "I'm not sure that's part of my job, sir." Hargrove leaned forward, his eyes glinting. "Oh, come on now. You're a bright guy, aren't you? Or is waiting tables all you're good for? Go on, read it. Translate it. Let's see what you've got." The words were meant to sting, and they did. But Marcus didn't let it show. He picked up the document, his fingers steady, and scanned the first few lines. The room seemed to hold its breath. Hargrove leaned back, arms crossed, clearly expecting Marcus to falter. What Hargrove didn't know, what no one at that table knew, was that Marcus was fluent in German. He'd spent 4 years studying linguistics at NYU, graduating with honors before financial pressures forced him to take on multiple jobs, including this one. German had been his focus, a language he'd mastered through years of study and a semester abroad in Berlin. He could read the contract as easily as he could read the menu. Marcus cleared his throat and began. "This section outlines the terms of the intellectual property transfer. It states that all proprietary software developed by Technicvores prior to the acquisition date will remain under their control unless explicitly licensed to Pinnacle Enterprises under a separate agreement. It also specifies a penalty clause for unauthorized use of said software, enforceable under German law. He continued, his voice steady and precise, translating line after line with the ease of someone who had spent years dissecting legal and technical texts. The executive's expressions shifted from amusement to surprise, then to something akin to awe. Hargrove's smirk faded, replaced by a look of stunned disbelief. When Marcus finished, he set the document down gently. "That's the gist of it," he said, his tone matter-of-fact. "Would you like me to go over any specific section?" The silence that followed was deafening. Hargrove's face was frozen, his mouth slightly open, as if he couldn't process what had just happened. One of the executives, a woman named Claire, broke the tension with a nervous laugh. "Well, I'll be damned," she said. "That was impressive." Hargrove recovered quickly, but his voice was tight. "Where did you learn to do that?" Marcus shrugged, his expression still calm. "I studied linguistics in college. German was one of my languages." Hargrove's eyes narrowed. "And you're working here. Why?" The question wasn't entirely malicious, but it carried an edge of disbelief, as if Marcus's presence in a waiter's uniform was an affront to logic. Marcus met his gaze evenly. "Life doesn't always go the way you planned, sir. But I'm good at what I do here, and it pays the bills." The table was quiet again, the weight of Marcus's words settling over them. Hargrove, for once, seemed at a loss. He opened his mouth to respond, but no words came. Instead, he nodded curtly and turned back to his wine. Marcus returned to his work, clearing plates and refilling glasses, but the dynamic in the room had shifted. The executives were more subdued now, their laughter less boisterous. Claire, the executive who had spoken earlier, caught Marcus's eye as he passed. "You should be in a boardroom, not a dining room," she said quietly, her tone genuine. Marcus smiled faintly. "Maybe someday," he replied and moved on. As the night wore on, Hargrove remained unusually quiet. He watched Marcus with a mix of curiosity and something else, perhaps respect, perhaps unease. When the group finally left, Hargrove lingered, pulling out his wallet to leave a tip. He hesitated, then scribbled something on a napkin and tucked it under the bill. When Marcus cleared the table later, he found the napkin. On it, in Hargrove's sharp, angular handwriting, was a note. "Call my office. We need people like you." Below it was a phone number and a signature. Marcus stared at the note for a long moment, his expression unreadable. He folded it carefully and slipped it into his pocket. He didn't know if he'd call. Part of him wanted to. Part of him wasn't sure he wanted to work for a man like Hargrove. But for the first time in a long time he felt seen. The next day, word of the encounter spread through La Belle Étoile's staff like wildfire. The other waiters, cooks, and bartenders whispered about it in the kitchen, marveling at how Marcus had turned the tables on a man who thought he held all the power. Some urged him to call the number, to seize the opportunity. Others cautioned him, warning that men like Hargrove didn't offer something for nothing. Marcus didn't rush to decide. He went about his shifts, serving tables, bantering with customers, and keeping his thoughts to himself. But the napkin stayed in his pocket, a small reminder of a moment that had changed something fundamental, not just for him but for everyone who had witnessed it. Over the next week, Marcus reflected on his life. He'd grown up in Brooklyn, raised by a single mother who worked 2 jobs to keep them afloat. He'd been the first in his family to go to college, carrying the weight of their hopes and his own ambitions. Linguistics had been his passion, a way to understand the world through its words, but after graduation, student loans and family obligations had piled up. Waiting tables had been a practical choice, not a reflection of his potential. The encounter with Hargrove stirred something in him, a reminder of the person he'd once dreamed of becoming. He started researching Pinnacle Enterprises, digging into their operations, their culture, their reputation. He learned that Hargrove was a polarizing figure, admired for his brilliance but criticized for his arrogance. Pinnacle had a linguistics division, working on natural language processing for AI systems, an area Marcus had studied extensively. The fit was almost too perfect. Still, he hesitated. He'd seen how Hargrove treated people, how he wielded his power. Would working for him mean compromising his principles? Or was this a chance to prove himself on a bigger stage? One evening after a long shift, Marcus sat in the break room, the napkin in his hand. He dialed the number. A receptionist answered, her voice crisp and professional. Pinnacle Enterprises. How may I direct your call? This is Marcus Evans, he said. I was told to call by Mr. Hargrove. There was a pause, then a click as the call was transferred. A moment later, Hargrove's voice came through. Marcus, he said, his tone warmer than it had been that night. I was hoping you'd call. They spoke for nearly an hour. Hargrove was direct, offering Marcus a position in the linguistics division, starting as a junior analyst with the potential to move up quickly. The salary was more than Marcus made in a year at the restaurant. Hargrove didn't apologize for his behavior that night, but he acknowledged Marcus's skill, calling it a rare find. Marcus listened, asked questions, and weighed his options. By the end of the call, he agreed to meet with the hiring team the following week. He hung up, feeling a mix of excitement and apprehension. This was a chance, but it was also a leap into the unknown. The meeting with Pinnacle's team went better than he'd expected. They were impressed by his academic background and his performance at the restaurant. They offered him the job on the spot, and Marcus accepted. He gave his 2 weeks' notice at La Belle Étoile, where his co-workers threw him a small going-away party, toasting to his future. On his last day, as he walked out of the restaurant, he felt a weight lift. He didn't know what lay ahead, but for the first time in years, he felt like he was moving toward something, not just surviving. At Pinnacle, Marcus thrived. He brought a fresh perspective to the linguistics team, his insights shaping their AI projects in ways they hadn't anticipated. Hargrove, true to his word, kept an eye on Marcus's progress, occasionally pulling him into high-level meetings. Their relationship wasn't warm, but it was professional, built on a mutual, if grudging, respect. Months later, at a company-wide conference, Hargrove recounted the story of their first meeting to a room full of employees. He framed it as a lesson in recognizing talent, though he glossed over his own role in the confrontation. Marcus, sitting in the audience, listened quietly. He didn't need Hargrove's validation anymore. He'd earned his place. The story of that night at La Belle Étoile became something of a legend at Pinnacle. It was a reminder that brilliance could come from anywhere, that assumptions could be dangerous, and that a single moment could change everything. For Marcus, it was more than that. It was the moment he stopped being invisible and started being unstoppable.